The Golden Hour Birth Podcast, a podcast about real birth stories and creating connections through our shared experiences.
Childbirth isn't just about the child. It's about the person who gave birth, their lives, their wisdom, and their empowerment.
We're Liz
and Natalie,
the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, and we're here to laugh with you,
cry with you,
and hold space for you. Welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host, Liz.
And I'm your co-host, Natalie. And tonight we have Lara from Cambridge, Massachusetts on. She is a comedian, content creator, an avid runner, and a mom of two. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Lara.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be talking about things other than running for once. Really nice.
Yeah, it was fun, like kind of discovering you. I saw your reel, probably the one that is like the most popular, where you're like postpartum running with your stroller, and it just like captured that period of postpartum just like so perfectly. And like I loved your twist on it. It was so good.
We all have high hopes. Hopes. Delusional high hopes. But you know what? You got to be optimistic when you're pregnant. You know, I'm never going to squash a woman's dreams of like what they hope their postpartum journey to look like.
I just love the part, can't leave the baby.
So tonight, my husband was out to dinner, and so I put the boys to sleep and left their room, and then like immediately went and put my shoes on to go for a walk. And I like got out the front door, and I was like, "What are you doing?" I forgot he wasn't home, and you can't just leave your house with your two toddlers.
I wish you could.
I know. So this is like all too frequent, I guess, in my life.
I think it's funny, like the nights that my husband is gone are the nights that I really want to like go for a walk.
Yes. It's one ways you can't have, I think.
Yeah, always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely nights where, we'll put the kids down. I'm like, I wish we could just go for a walk, like a nice husband and wife walk, you know?
Yeah, I know. Can't really do that much anymore, but one day.
Yeah.
Yes. So kind of twisting back around, if you want to tell us a little bit about your family and deciding to start a family.
Yeah. So I got married. We got married in 2016. And I am 3 years older than my husband. So as many know, unfortunately, that plays into kind of family planning. And I was 30 when we got married, or almost 31. And so we were out in San Francisco where we had been living for the last 5 years, and decided that whenever I got pregnant, we would move back east because both of our families are East Coast. Both of our like parents are. So we both always wanted kids. It wasn't really that wasn't up for debate, just kind of like when. And we were just really lucky. Like I think a year after we got married, a year and a handful of months, I was like, okay, maybe would be a good time. And I got pregnant immediately. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was great news. And we lived at the time in like a 300 square foot apartment in San Francisco. It was basically above a 2-car garage. And it was this magical cottage that was like in a rose garden, but very much not big enough for a baby. Like people are like, oh, well, you could have had a newborn there. There wasn't even like floor space for a bassinet. I mean, it was so tiny. We had lots of jokes about if we could put the bassinet out on the porch, lift up the couch. So, those IKEA couches, storage. But ultimately decided to move back east before the baby was born. So I have 2 boys, Jack and Julian. Jack's the older one. And when we moved back, like I look back at that time and it's a little sad now, because I had like we talk about postpartum depression all the time, but I definitely had it coming into labor. So like it was summer. He was born in September, and it just was such like it was just a sad time in general. And I was pulled away from my community in San Francisco. I had no friends back east. All of my friends from college. I went to school in Boston, but they had all since moved. And so it's super isolating to be pregnant in general. It's kind of, especially when you're a runner and that's kind of how you build your community. I wasn't doing that anymore. And so it was tough. And, you're heading into this thing that you've never done before, and it's terrifying. You just don't know how it's about to like uproot your life. And so, yeah, I go in, optimistically, bought that running stroller. But yeah, it was exciting, but it was a tough period I look back on. And I kind of like set myself up for a tough postpartum period, I think, because I just didn't have the village that everyone talks about, you know? My parents are 3 hours away. My husband's parents are close. But it's just, you know, like we had friends that were family in San Francisco. And so it was really tough leaving them behind.
How many months were you when you moved?
I think it was 5 months.
Okay.
That's a lot.
5 or 6. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like nerve-wracking, like changing doctors and like trying to practice that kind of suits you. But we just got lucky there. Obviously Boston's got a great medical, you know, reputation. There's a million hospitals here. So it was pretty smooth. It was pretty smooth. The biggest thing was when we got the genetic testing done for Jack, we got got flagged for potentially having Down syndrome. And so I opted to get an amniocentesis like the day before we left San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
I was like about to get in the car, but I was like, let's do this. It will soothe. Like, you know how you can get a couple different more options. Like you don't have to get an amnio, but I was like, it will ease my mind. I'm someone who would just like to know everything. So luckily, I think we got those results a week or two later, and then it was all fine and good. And I think I was still on the road, so I drove solo. I drove the car back to Boston, but I did kind of like a whole zigzag through the country to see my friends and stuff. So that was really fun too, just to kind of like, because I wasn't rushing to a job or anything, so I was like, my time.
That's nice.
But getting that phone call was really great. Just clear my brain, you know.
Did you were you a runner then?
Always.
You've always been a runner?
Yeah.
Did you keep running when you were pregnant? And
I did. I kept running for as long as I could. Probably I had pain. I wouldn't call it pain. I had discomfort. Just heaviness. I hated the fact that I had to pee immediately, like even early on. Like you don't even have a belly yet, but you have to pee. And you're incredibly out of breath, like 8 weeks pregnant. It was just like blowing my mind. And I was like, this is just frustrating. But I think the PT in me actually, the athlete in me wanted to push. The PT in me was like, don't do it. It's not worth it. And so I listened, and I ran on and off probably till about 16 weeks, 17 weeks. And then I was like, I think I hopped into a couple of fun races just to run slowly with friends. But I did not run through my pregnancy like kind of I thought I would, or, you know, the things that you have. But I was like, you know what? All good, because I will recover easier. And it worked out for both pregnancies for me. I just didn't really run much during the pregnancy, and I had no injuries to deal with postpartum. So, and I kind of contributed to that, you know?
Yeah. When you were feeling like pretty down when you moved, did you feel like you had depression, or were you like, now, is it like looking back? Now you're
looking back.
Yeah.
I had never struggled with mental health prior. And so I kind of just didn't know. And so I just figured, you're bummed because you moved, you had blah, 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 blah. But I think there was also like a hormonal component that I was just choosing to ignore. I knew doctors who didn't know to like, who didn't know me, right? So they may have asked a couple questions, but it's not like someone who knows you and you're like, yeah, you should like ask about medication or whatever. I just assumed it's just stress from, which it was stressful to move across the country.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was just something that I was much more cognizant of the second time around.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, birth. Yeah.
So birth. Yeah. So I passed the due date.
That's fun.
I know. It was like 3 days past the due date was my husband's birthday. And it was that night at like, I went to bed. It was a Sunday night. And at 11 o'clock, I just felt this huge gush in the bed. I actually think I felt a little bit and I jumped out of bed and then it gushed all over the bed.
Oh.
It was like a proper water break.
Yeah.
And I was a little bummed because I wanted this to like happen in public because I really wanted a story. I was like, oh man, okay, well, whatever. So, called the hospital. They're like, do you have contractions? I was like, no. And they're like, okay, well, come in at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Tomorrow. And so I was like, okay, so unless of course your contractions pick up. And so I like got into bed, but of course I didn't sleep because I'm just like, I was having very subtle, like almost period pain type contractions. And my husband's fast asleep. He's like, I'm going to go back to bed. I was like, sure. And then you're like doing the timer on your phone, the whole bit. And probably around 3 a.m., they started to pick up. And of course, your first time, you don't know. So you're like, this must be the bad stuff. No, you have absolutely no idea. But you're like, okay, well, we should definitely go to the hospital.
Yes.
So we called and they were like, yeah, come in. And so it was like so smooth because I really wasn't in that much pain. What I thought was pain, but of course it was the beginning stages. And I was like, like a little pent over, but like still fine, still walking around. And so we get into a room, we do the whole thing. And probably like 3 hours later, I remember the sun coming up and being like, I need the epidural now. And of course, it takes like an hour because the anesthesiologist is caught up and yada yada. And then you're like, what did I? But something that happens with me is that I'm like, well, okay. So the epidural worked wonders, took a nap, had a, just a relaxing day at the hospital. It was wonderful until it wasn't. Like all of a sudden, so he was born at 6 p.m. So I would probably say around like 3 p.m. Like I could really like, okay, so first off, the epidural was incredibly strong. I couldn't even wiggle my toes. Like I couldn't move my legs, which that was very bothersome. Like I wanted to kind of at least be able to adjust them a little, but okay. So they're like moving me, whatever, moving me around. And then labor stops. And because, for whatever reason, but sometimes the epidural. So then they start pumping me with Pitocin. I got the tube going, right? Then the epidural wears off.
Oh my God.
This hit me like a Mack truck. And so I went from being completely numb and feeling great to being like 8 centimeters, Pitocin, and just everything kind of like flying at me at once. And I was, of course, screaming. And so then I'm like trying just to labor through it. And we're waiting for the anesthesiologist to come back and hopefully fix the epidural. And by wear off, I mean, I know that's like the wrong way of saying it. It must have just gotten like kind of like poorly adjusted in my back. But I remember specifically with Jack, there was this, every contraction, I had this shooting pain down my right hip that went all the way to my toes.
Oh.
So I had to And also they could only have me on my right side because his heart rate was dropping if I was on my back or on my left side. So I could only be on my right side.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
shooting down my right hip. So I would have to side plank, like into a plank while I was like breathing because that was the only I could manage.
Oh my God.
And so I did that for about an hour. And and then finally it was time to push the and it like the anesthesiologist was like, and I was like, forget it, you just kind of are like, forget it. And at that point, and so then I pushed for about 20 minutes and his heart rate was just plummeting. And so I like agreed to let them use the vacuum. Is that right?
Mhm.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they vacuumed Jack out. And he looked like okay, he had the perfect cone. And I was like, whoa. But that went away almost immediately.
That's good.
He was perfectly healthy. And I think like for me, I was in this state of euphoria. I was just so happy that the shooting pain down my right side was done. And I just felt like you just learned so much that first go around.
Yeah.
Do you have, how many kids do you have?
We both have two.
Oh, you both have two. Okay. So
Mhm.
so it's like the second time around, it's just a different game.
Yeah.
So it could be worse, but this but yeah. And so I remember like for him, like the recovery was incredibly hard. It also, again, goes along with postpartum. He was a terrible breastfeeder. And like the lactation consultants were in, I had them at home every day coming to see him. And they couldn't really quite figure it out. And then all of a sudden he just went on strike. And so he refused to nurse. So then I was pumping. So I was an exclusive pumper and it just was the most miserable experience. And I hated every second.
Yeah.
How long did you go for?
I went for 5 months, which I went into the second pregnancy and I was like, if this one doesn't nurse, going straight to formula. There's nothing against I have nothing against formula. But again, those postpartum hormones, like culture, everything just makes you think that like this is what you're supposed to be doing. And so it was terrible.
Yeah. It's really hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up to that damn machine. So yeah. So it just was like, I didn't recover really quickly. I felt like just kind of completely out of my body. I don't know. I don't look back on like Jack's postpartum experience fondly. And it was September heading into winter. It gets dark pretty fast. And it just was like this combination of everything, like no community, completely overwhelmed with your first kid, pumping, feeling like I was failing, hormones. It just was everything. And it led to anxiety and just being like really recluse. Like I just kind of like didn't reach out to people. I wasn't leaving the house much. And then Jack was like kind of colicky. He was like borderline colicky. It was so bad for like 6 months.
Oh, you wonder like how you get through it sometimes. Like now you're
Right?
so far past it, but you're like, how did I do that?
How did I do that?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of text threads with friends,
Yeah.
Being like, is my kid okay? And then being like, no, it's normal, it's just,
Yeah.
but it's so hard. Yeah. And then heading into a dark winter. So I actually started training for the Boston Marathon when I was 4 months postpartum. And
Oh, wow.
Oh my God.
yeah. And so I ran it 6 months. I was 6.5 months postpartum when I ran Boston. And it honestly, though, was like the best thing for me because it's just like getting me out of my house
Yeah.
in the dark, cold mornings at like 5 a.m. I would like feed them and then just go run. And it was like the only time of day. My husband and I were going to do that, like, you take your leave and then I'll take my leave. And then, as we do in America to just try and patch together some childcare. We made it like a week into him going back to work. And I was like, I can't be alone with this screaming baby 10 hours while you're at work. Like we have to just do this together. And
Yeah.
So like I look back at that, I'm like, and I just like give little Laura a hug and be like, man, this is your first babe. It should be like a pretty joyous time, but it was really, really tough. But
Did
we
you
came out.
guys? Yeah.
We came out.
Did you guys like get leave with your new jobs?
So in healthcare it sucks. So I was part-time. So I think I like qualified for unpaid leave, and then but I only got 12 weeks of unpaid leave.
Yeah.
He got 4 months paid.
Oh
Now
my
it's up to
gosh,
six.
that's
Now he gets
amazing.
6 months paid, which is great. He works at Google, so
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Thanks, Google.
Yeah, thanks, gigs. So yeah, so that's been really great. And then when I went back with Julian, I was per diem, so I didn't get any paid leave again. So it was kind of the same deal. It really stinks because you're just taking such a hit, but it's coming. I mean, Massachusetts does have paid leave through the state, but you had to like make a certain amount. Whatever. It's a long story, but basically,
Yeah.
But so it took me like a good year and a half to even consider having another child, which I always knew I wanted. I'm one of 5 kids, so I was like, absolutely. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Which number are you? 4. Oh, I'm 30. I always knew I wanted a sibling for my child, but like, man, the first year of his life, I was like, and then he was a really hard toddler. I mean, he was so tough. Now he's like this angel child. I'm like, well, we earned that.
Yeah. Yeah, you put the work in early.
Yeah. I think I wanted it together. Like you put the work in somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I like to even consider that. I was like, okay. And then he during the pandemic summer, like 2020 summer, I was like, let's just do it. Let's just like this now.
We both got pregnant in 2022.
Yeah. What else was there to do?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Totally. It just was like at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was really nervous. But then when we realized we were just kind of like in this for the long haul, it's like, okay, let's have babies. Let's bring a child into this fucked up world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with Julian, kind of the same thing, same thought process went into it. What sucks is getting back into shape and then losing it all again. So it was like pretty good. But yeah, I got pregnant, I think like 4 months into our attempts of like actually paying attention. His was really smooth. Jack had like a couple bumps, like the amnio, and then I kind of had some like cardiac stuff, but like Julian was so smooth. I was super distracted because I had this 2-year-old. So it just kind of went by a lot faster. I gained so much more weight. I'm also one of those people that like gains weight when they leave the hospital. Like I like birthed like an 8-pound baby and a placenta, and then I gained 10 pounds in the hospital. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. And like my body, I don't think naturally makes milk easily. So I'm one of those people who's constantly having like good fats and, just like constant calories just to try and if I like miss an afternoon, you see it immediately in my milk supply. So I'm consuming so many calories to make the milk, and I'm just like gaining weight postpartum. It's so funny. But yeah, so Julian's birth story. Okay, so we live in a 2-family house, which is really common in Cambridge. And upstairs, our neighbor is a saint. As first off, she like listens to our circus down here all the time. But she's also just like super involved, loves the boys. And so she was our like middle of the night, person if I were to go into labor. And this was 3 days before his due date. At about 5 p.m., I started having light contractions, but I went to bed and they just kind of started picking up throughout the night. And I didn't even tell my husband. Like, he was just asleep, sound asleep. And I was like, it's better for everyone. And so I was up the whole night kind of counting them. And about like 4 a.m., I got up and I went into the living room and I watched Sex in the City while I like labored.
Love that.
And my goal was to make it until 6 a.m. because that's when I know Natalie usually wakes up. And I just really didn't want to inconvenience her. So I was like, I can do this. I can labor mostly at home. This is my second time around. We live 2 minutes from the hospital. So super easy.
Yeah.
And so, of course,
You
I
could just
called
run
up.
there.
I could run there. I could run there.
Run the baby out.
That's a big story. So yeah, so I was like, okay. I call a hospital. They're like, we're really busy. Like, maybe take a shower. Kind of like it sounds like you still have a little ways to go. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I was like, okay, I'll go take a shower. I didn't even make it down the hall. All of a sudden, it just went from like 30 to 60. And I was like, shit, like, we got to go. So I woke Connor up and he was like, what? Like, you're in labor? And I was like, not only am I in labor, we're going right now. I've been in labor for 13 hours. And he went upstairs, got Natalie, made sure that they were all set. We get in the car, we drive to the hospital, we get out of the car, and he's like, I forgot my bag, my wallet, like everything. And I was like, okay.
Perfect. Sure did.
I was like, I feel like you need ID. I don't really know why, but I feel like you should have your ID. So I was like, let's go home. And like I said, it's 2 minutes. There was something about that 2 minutes that again pumped it up like another notch. He ran back in, ran back out. And then when I got back to the hospital, we parked on the street because Cambridge parking, like it's, I could have parked in the lot and paid, but I live in the neighborhood. So like I had the street sticker. So all I had to do was walk a block, and it took me like 15 minutes because I was stopping every 2 or 3 feet. So we get into the triage, you go upstairs, you go into the triage, and they're like taking my blood pressure and stuff. And it's just right, just like every 2 contractions, it's going up another notch and then another notch. And when I got there, I was at 5 centimeters, which I was very proud of myself for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I was like, all right, epidural, please. And so they were like, okay. I was like, I definitely want one. Just like, go get the anesthesiologist. And I got into a robe. Then they were like, okay, it was, I think, about half an hour. Then they were like, okay, your room is ready. So we walked to the room. All of a sudden, I just start throwing up. I'm in so much pain. I went from 5 to 9.5 centimeters in like 25 minutes. And I was like,
Oh my God.
I feel like I need to push. And they were like, not yet. Not yet. And I was like, I really want this epidural though. But because they were like, no, you're not quite there. And I was like, oh, holy shit. And so I got the epidural, and you have to sit completely still. I'm puking into a bag off the side. I'm like holding myself because I just know that I'm like about to freak out. I'm in so much pain. I had back contractions. Back labor is something else.
Yes.
Different kind of hell. But luckily, no shooting pains down my right side.
There you go. No planks.
But yeah, just that wild how it just went. Like I labored all night. So that's what's like weird. I labored all night, and it was a very gradual build, and then it just shot up.
Yeah.
So I got the epidural, and it started working, and they're like, we really want you to get to a full 10 before you start pushing. And because I couldn't feel it anymore, I was like, okay, I'm down with the plan, because I'm comfortable. Well, just like in Jack's, it didn't work after like 20 minutes. The epidural was like not working. And so I was like, okay, please tell me then that I'm allowed to start pushing. And my nurse, I'll never forget my nurse for Julian. Like Jack's, they were kind of for Julian. I was like, the next day, I was like, Connor, can we like buy her a car? An angel from heaven. But the doctor was like, not like, he thought it was going to take a little while. So like, he just was like, yeah, I'll put around. But yeah, you can start pushing. with the nurse if you want. And so it was like Connor and the nurse. And I asked this time to like be on my side because I thought that would help. Just it felt more natural. And so, yeah, I pushed for like 15 minutes and they were like, stop pushing. And I was like, no, how do you do that to somebody? And they're like, no, talk to her. And I'm like, well, I told you I'm efficient. And and because you can feel without the epidural, I do think that helps you with your pushing. Like you can just like actually figure it out a little bit faster. But yeah. And so he came running in, begging me not to push while he gets like all his sterile shit out. And I'm like, what? Am I supposed to like close my legs right now? This is absolutely wild. That was very frustrating. But yeah, and then for Julian, we didn't know if it was a boy or girl, but like I knew 100% it was a boy. And he came out and someone said, she's beautiful. And I got so excited. Oh, I love my boys, but man, I was so excited it was a girl and it was not a girl.
They just not
Connor,
look all the
Connor
way.
was like supposed to like be like say the name, but he was sobbing and he like couldn't get it out. And I was like, tell me, like, what do you see down there? Like, don't tell me what you see down there. But yeah, so yeah, and then he was great too. And then he kind of classic second kid was just easier, you know. He was better at nursing immediately. He was more chill. He was a better sleeper. He wasn't colicky. I mean, just kind of like totally eased into the family, like he was always there. And he's been a mama's boy ever since. So, yeah, everything about number 2 for me was so much easier. The whole postpartum journey. Also, this is very, very important. I went on Zoloft the second that I left the hospital. I left with a prescription in my hand, and I just
awesome.
I was like, I'm not here to mess around this time. I want to just set myself up for success.
Yes.
And it was just like a low dose, and it took a couple of weeks to kind of like settle in, and it was perfect. I think I was only on it for like 8 months, and then I was like, I don't think I feel like I even need it. Maybe I didn't need it at all, but I was so happy that I had it, you know, and that it drastically made my whole postpartum experience better, you know, and I recovered faster, the whole thing, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Did you ever seek like medical or like a counselor when you were postpartum with your first, when you were feeling?
I didn't. I ended up seeing a therapist, I think a year when Jack was a year old. And it was funny. Like I see the therapist as I was feeling better. It's like almost like that looking back on the last year. And I was like, wow, I was in a dark place. Like, let me talk it out. Let's
work through that. Yeah, for sure.
Work through it. So, I got a therapist at that time. I never went on medication that time around, but I highly recommend it. If it works for you, it's incredible. And I was able to like safely breastfeed on it. And it just was so nice to just have that one extra tool, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We love medication.
Yes. Very pro medication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get started on like making reels for Instagram and like being a content creator?
So after I had Julian, I was kind of burnt out on PT. I've been a physical therapist for 12 years, and I was like, I want to go back to PT. I just don't want to do it 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
So I used to have a podcast and like used to interviewing people. And so I created this production company called Folktale Film, and I made legacy videos. So I would interview people all about their lives, and then their families would have these videos forever.
That's cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And that was fun. It was a ton of work. Like these videos are like almost 2 hours long. And so it was a ton of editing. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, I don't like, this is great, but is this like fully what I want to be doing? And so I was just kind of exploring all these things. And then one of my friends was like, you should start doing comedy. And I was like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. Like I've never been in front of the camera type of person. Like I've never used to take selfies or anything like that. And so then she's like, just make 2. And so I made 2 and they did really well. And one of them was that stroller video. And so the running stroller one really took off. And then I started talking and I realized like, it's not me vlogging day to day about my life. Like if you look at my feed, you actually don't learn that much about who I am because I'm playing characters and it's always about running. So that feels good to me. Like I'm not someone who feels totally comfortable going on the internet and telling people absolutely everything about my life, what I'm up to today and blah, blah, blah. But I can go on and be an idiot and just like write a comedy sketch and act it out. Like that to me felt less embarrassing, which to many people, it would be very much more embarrassing. Yeah, so I just kept doing it. And because of like my friends and like past jobs and run connections, I knew people at different run brands and I just emailed them out of the blue and was like, I'm making these videos. Do you guys want to pay for them? And they were like, yep. I was like, okay, cool. And then that just, it all snowballed very quickly.
That's awesome.
It would have been a year yet. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a problem talking about myself too. Like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a TikTok and like I put up the camera and I'm like, what? No, never mind.
I know. And then I don't want to put my kids online. So I don't have them anywhere near it. Connor's like, I think maybe in 1. Like it's really just me acting like a fool. But it's all about running. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, it resonates with anyone who's ever put on running shoes. It's just, they're kind of like inside jokes to the sport. And so
yeah,
they're really, really fun. And it's given me opportunities, that I never would have thought I had, like working with pro runners and such a dream. So it's been a great year. It's been a great year. So I stopped doing PT because it was just paying the bills. And I was like, well, then I can just take a break. Over the years, I've taken breaks from PT. I find it to be really healthy for me.
Yeah.
So I'll just take a break for a little while and see how it goes. And when I become irrelevant, then I'll just go back to the hospital.
That's a great plan.
Yeah. I have a pretty healthy relationship with it. I'm not worried about like having people love me for the next decade. Like I'm like, yeah, this is only a year. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows what'll be the next thing?
Yeah, totally. Right. That's just how it works. So
yeah.
It's been really fun though. And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. I love really funny.
Yeah. I love the part where you're like passing MIT and you're like, and the boys will know that they will never go here.
Don't let them think that they are MIT grads in their future. It's so good. That's always the joke, like living in Cambridge, especially in our neighborhood. We have people, it's just a very educated part of the country, hyper educated. And so like one of our neighbors is in Biden's cabinet and the other one like invented Pringles and the other one, like, it's just like the people that you're surrounded by on a day-to-day basis are the people who are like, I don't know, running the country and solving real problems. And then it comes to like Connor and I, and we're like, like, I make videos for the internet. But I'm not doing that. I'm a physical therapist. And people are like, whoa, that's like a real person's job. I'm like, and we definitely don't belong in this area, but it's interesting to say the least.
Where are you guys both from?
So he's from the suburbs out here. I'm from upstate New York, like suburbia, upstate. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add or any advice you have for new moms postpartum?
New moms postpartum, I mean, my biggest thing is like, especially with my second kid, what I learned on the first is educate your partner or a friend or your parent and be like, these are the things you want to look out for postpartum depression and anxiety and psychosis, because when you're in it, you don't see it. Yeah. And so it's really nice to have someone who's not having these wild hormone imbalances and not having these like huge body changes, to be really educated on what to look for, and when to approach you and say, you know what, maybe we should talk to a doctor about it. Maybe we should go see a therapist together. Like that was what's something when I went into my second pregnancy, I was like, we were on top of. Obviously very pro meds. And then also a real big advocate for pelvic floor PT. And we all know the benefits of it, especially postpartum. But my biggest advice is to go before you give birth. And because I think the hardest thing is to make appointments when you have a newborn. You're like,
Yeah.
the thing I want to do is like go schlep across town for an appointment. For me, you know, it's hard enough to get out of the house. But if you already have this rapport with a therapist and you already know the routine and it's like on the schedule, you don't have to call. It's so helpful. And you know what's happening when you go in there. They're already giving you exercises to start, like postpartum. So that's I think just like a really good thing to add to your list of ways to help yourself and set yourself up for a good postpartum experience.
That's
Definitely.
really good advice, because I remember after Arthur wanting to do pelvic floor therapy, but I didn't really know what it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like still kind of healing down there. And I'm like, are they going to like how invasive is it? But if I had gone before, I would have known, you know, kind of what it would be like.
Yeah, totally. And it's also as like invasive as you are comfortable with. Like there are certain tests and exercises that do require like an internal testing, but obviously no practitioner is ever going to do something that you're not comfortable with. There's also plenty of things that they can do that's not invasive. But yeah, like just finding the right fits, kind of like finding the right therapist. It's just, but there's something special about pelvic floor PTs. It's kind of like going into OBGYN, like you're a special kind of person and they're incredible and they're professional and they know like most of their clients are parents. And so it's just, I don't know. They're my favorite kinds of physical therapists. I have no expertise in that area, but whenever I come across a pelvic floor PT, I'm just like, oh, yeah, you're wonderful. But it's hard. I mean, you're so busy. It's just hard. We all know it's hard to like make an appointment. It's like, and then you gotta like, you're usually on a wait list. There's always a wait list. So that's why I say get it handled before, like when you're like 7 months pregnant. It's like, get schedule, and then it's something, one less thing you have to think about.
For sure. Yeah. And if I can't make an appointment online, like I'm not.
I know. It's like, you want me to pick up the phone?
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
I called a pelvic floor PT when I was like 7-8 months pregnant, and they didn't even have an opening until after I gave birth. And I'm like, well, I don't need you then. And I was like, I probably should have just made the appointment.
I know. You can always cancel. Just make the appointments.
Yeah.
Like there's always a wait. I know. They're in high demand.
Yeah. Yep. People always having babies.
Always having babies, even in pandemics.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love what you said too about like just telling your partner or a parent or a friend just signs to look out for. I think I actually scared my husband Sam like too much, because I was like if I cry, you need to ask me what's going on. And so like the first day I cried when we were home, and he's like, "Are you okay? You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's just like my hormones leveling out." Like he was extra on top of it. So I'm super thankful for that.
Yeah. Like, I need air. I need space. I need a backup.
And he's a mental health therapist, so he's like, he really knows what he's doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wonderful stories and your different experiences postpartum. I'm happy that the second one was just, coming through, and it was all better all around.
Yeah, definitely. It's the experience in both childbirth and postpartum. It's just, there's nothing that can replace experience, right? It's just the best. It's a confidence builder too. So
Mhm.
So true.
We have a third. I feel like I'll just be able to do it with my accent now.
That's awesome. So where can people find you online if they want to see your hilarious videos?
Yeah, so I'm at Laura McGreen, mostly on Instagram. I do put them on TikTok. No one really likes them there.
It's a different crowd.
Yeah. Instagram is the main thing.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing
Thanks
your
for having
story.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, we'll post all your information in the show notes. And just thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion and found it insightful and beneficial. Remember, the Golden Hour Birth Podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you appreciate the content we bring you each week, consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform or sharing the show with your friends and family. Your support helps us reach more people and continue creating valuable episodes. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on our website, www.goldenhourbirthpodcast, or connect with us on social media. We value your feedback and want to make sure that we're delivering the content you want to hear. Before we sign off, we'd like to express our gratitude to our incredible guests who joined us today. We are honored that they trust us enough to be so open and vulnerable. We're grateful for their time and willingness to share their stories with us. If you're interested in taking the conversation further with us, join us on our Facebook group, The Golden Hour Birth Circle. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to tune in. Until then, stay golden and remember to take care of yourself. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. Bye!